Welcome back to the Graduate's Guide podcast, where taking the path less travelled is celebrated. We're your hosts, Emma and Gabby, and today we're going to be talking about how success doesn't really happen overnight.
Even though sometimes it feels like it does.
Mm-hmm.
I know I get bombarded on Instagram and TikTok, and I see all these people doing success, and I'm like, ah!
I know. It's the rise of social media, I think, has increased it for sure in terms of how much we're seeing, especially influencer culture. I know that started maybe 10 or so years ago. And in the beginning it was like, wow, all these people are becoming successful just for being themselves, and it was this very attractive thing. I think we're a way away from that time now, where it feels like we're a bit more aware that they've branded themselves. They're kind of, it's their job, it's not all glamorous. A lot of them have come out saying that it's not so glamorous and spilling the tea. But yeah, I think TikTok is relaunched it a little bit in terms of here's a 30-second clip of me being very successful overnight, and it's hiding the truth that it didn't happen in 30 seconds,
Yeah, that's so true, because it's you think about the YouTubers back in the day, like Jenna Marbles shit, it was a much more longer content, so you sort of got to know, and when she talked about the behind the scenes of how much work actually goes into putting just one episode up a week, whereas TikTok and those little shorts that you see on Instagram, it's these 30 seconds and you just get a snippet of someone's success, and when you see that you're like, oh, but it can be quite detrimental, because I know you and me, we're trying to freak out and get our novels published, and being a successful writer, and just seeing all the book talkers on TikTok, a lot of them have book deals now, and they're like, yeah, I got my novel published in 1 year, and it's how did you do that? So because how do you feel with seeing that, and then you're currently working on your manuscript, and I think what is this the second draft now?
Third draft. There's definitely some envy that comes up straight away. It's how dare you, and you almost want to disprove it, and mostly the thing is you can disprove it. The TikTok that inspired kind of this topic that we wanted to talk about was a young author that was saying, I had this idea and within a year I'm published and have a movie deal. And then, it comes out through the comments and her answering questions that, oh, actually, no, I've been working on this book idea for 10 years. Yeah. And it's taken all these drafts and I've gotten all these rejections, and now I'm having success with it. So it's just very interesting that we automatically go to the place of, oh, look how quickly I was able to get to this point. And I wonder why we are so obsessed with doing things quickly, and why that makes it better than if we take our time and work hard. So yeah, for me as an aspiring writer, seeing that, it makes me feel like I have to rush. It makes me feel like I just have to get this done. I just have to start sending things out. I just have to start pitching right now, and getting the rejections and getting that part over with. And that even the writing of my first draft, I thought was slow. It took me 18 months to write a first draft. Whereas I even remember in the backs of some books I've read, it's oh, it was the longest 6 months ever writing this book. And I was like, what the hell? You wrote that in 6 months? I've been editing and stuff for we're going on 3 years. It's a long process for me.
Because you started it at the start of COVID, which is almost 3 years ago, like you said.
Yeah.
And it's, I guess, the harm I think that comes with TikTok and Instagram, and seeing that sort of instant gratification and success that those people got. It's you're happy for them, but you're sort of how? That doesn't make sense. Especially a lot of the time, most writers, they're doing it in their spare time. They're doing it when they can, because they haven't had that big break yet. And the very few that are successful, they're writing nonstop. They have a team behind them. So there's a lot of that you don't see. And I think that's the harm, I guess, that comes with seeing that sort of content and thinking, okay, well, that person was really successful. I have to get this out, otherwise I'm never going to make it. I'm never going to get my book published. I think Elvis agrees with me. He's barking his head off.
I can't really hear him, but hi,
that's
Elvis.
Good. Elvis is my little sausage dog. But anyway, when I was in high school and I was thinking about going on to become an actress, I used to think that, okay, the idols that I looked up to were like Jennifer Lawrence, Kate Blanchett. And Kate Blanchett, she went to WAPA, but she got she went to NIDA, but she got discovered very early on, and she got very successful. And then Jennifer Lawrence, she didn't go to acting school, but again, she won her first Oscar at 22 years old. So when I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, like if I don't make it into Hollywood by the time I'm like 20, 21, like I'm my dreams are expired. And I think that, like, while it's good to have young people to look up to that are so successful, it can also be really harmful, because a lot of the time they don't, and like this goes back to like what our message with is the Graduate's Guide. They don't talk about the journey. They just go, yeah, it was really hard, but I had to believe in myself and I had to go through some like crap, and then I made it. And it's like, no, like it's, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely.
I think it's quite like, it's not discouraging people to share, like if they want to share their content and they want to share like, oh, you know, I did this, it's like, congratulations, but don't lie about it, or don't sort of like glam it up as to be something it's not. I think, you know, when you see that like influencers as well, especially on TikTok these days, they have to make the content. And I'm a bit of a perfectionist, but when I've made TikToks before, I spend like a minimum like 2 hours on them, because I go, oh, okay, I'm going to edit this, I've got to do this. So it's like when you factor that in, and then I also work, I'm studying part-time, I'm studying full-time and working part-time. It's like, you know, is that something they're doing in their free time as like a hobby? But is like, do you know what I mean? I think sometimes you look at that and you go, they're doing this, they're doing that, how are they doing it? And you want the answers. Like one of the book talkers I follow, she was like, I read all of Throne of Glass and all these other books, and managed to edit my final draft before she's getting it published of her manuscript in like 14 days. I was like, how? It's like, it's just like I mean, the last one of Throne of Glass is over 1,000 pages long, and you sort of sit there and you go, how are they doing it, and why are we so obsessed with this gratification of, okay, it has to happen overnight? I mean, like it goes to show as well, like, you know, J.K. Rowling, for example, 7 book publishers turned her down. So it's like, why don't we talk about that? Because we did talk about that. But now we're talking about, okay, it's instant, it's like that. And I wonder if it has to do with like how TikTok and the apps, they're very instant. That sort of like dopamine hit where you're just like, yep,
the algorithm that's how it running.
Happens. So it's like, so it's like, maybe, okay, in order to get that sort of message drilled into people, it's like, oh, it's very instant, like, so it has to be instant, the video, to show that. But yeah, I'm much more interested in like a 30-second TikTok that is telling the truth, I guess. And I think that's what I like. I struggle with, I guess, seeing that content, because I go, how are you doing it? And then you start to question your own capabilities, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I think this can be applied. I know we've started talking about writing and stuff, but it can be applied in any area of your goals. Even like with uni, I think, and you might have something to say about this, the idea of getting your degree and all your degrees as quickly as possible and getting into the workforce. And for you, I know that you've went into the workforce, took your time to decide what you wanted to do, and then now going into uni and probably having a much more, not necessarily much more, but having a more thoughtful and intentional experience because you've taken the time. And I know for me, when I went, and we touched on it a little bit last episode, check that out if you haven't listened to it yet, about how I went straight in, and then I took like a 2-year break before I went back and did my postgrad. And I've had people be like, what were you waiting for? It's like, I didn't know what I wanted to do. You know, so it's this idea that, oh, get it done quickly, get on with it, you know. And it's like, well, why? what am I racing like, towards?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what's the pressure? I feel that very strongly. I think that maybe it has to do with like sort of the way school's set up. Like you go from like kindergarten to primary school to high school, so that it's like this constant thing of like you're always doing something, and there's always something lined up. And then after you get a degree, you might go on to postgraduate study, and then you get a job, and then you go up and you climb the corporate ladder, and it just keeps climbing.
I think a lot of it comes back down to how society defines success, and then how we define success on like an individual level, and that idea of going up the ranks in whatever field you're in, but the idea of this forward movement of always getting more and more and more in terms of income, in terms of experience, in terms of everything, is pretty much how we define success as a society in like a very general, simplified way. And I think when your individualist ideas of success don't match up with that, then you start to go, ooh, is what I'm thinking wrong? Am I not doing it right? Am I just not ambitious enough? Like, I know for me, for a long time, I was like, I'm just not a career person. I was like, that's just not my goal.
Right.
But I think it was more just that's not how I defined whether or not I was successful. So yeah, that's another interesting aspect to this thing of, this forward movement of like the virality and the, I got this many followers, now this many followers, and this, that really like success is climbing rather than just finding something you're content with and being like, wow, this makes me fulfilled and happy, and look, I'm successful. So that's, and I think that's maybe something that's being challenged on the internet a bit now. Like you see a lot of I'm not sure if you've seen like the slow living kind of movement that's happening.
I've heard of it. I haven't seen much of it though.
It's kind of like people, and some people take it to extreme. I mean, some people are living in cottages and growing their own food and like, but like, good on them, you know, why not?
Exactly.
So there is some challenges coming out to this, but I think again the fast-paced nature of TikTok and Instagram and YouTube these days is fighting pretty hard against that.
I found that like when I was working full-time, I would come home and you'd be mentally and also physically exhausted. So the last thing you want to do is, like, for me, for example, I find writing, you have to be in the right headspace, because even if it's like very fun, you can't just pump out like 1,000 words just because you've got the time. So I would come home, and instead of watching TV, I would just be on my phone, and I would waste like 4 hours easily on TikTok and just like scrolling on my For You page. And while like the content was entertaining, like I would go to work the next day and be like, okay, these writers have made it. These young successful people have made it, and they've made it very quickly. What am I doing wrong? And then I would just sort of like be adding it up, I guess, comparing myself to, okay, well, they're also working full time, so am I. So am I not as capable? And then I would also sort of spiral a little bit, if that makes sense, and just be like, well, I'm doing something wrong because I don't. But it can be quite detrimental in a way. And I think that's I guess the message to take away from, like, you're just seeing a surface level on the app. You're not seeing the behind the scenes. And I think I would love to see that. Like, I would love to see one of the, like, the book talkers talk about, like, I had the worst day writing, and you know, I struggled to get out the content. And they are out there, because like there are some that I follow, but they don't have a lot of followers, and they don't. I wonder, again, is that the algorithm that's like keeping them away, because it's more realistic, and like these videos of like instant gratification is also like sending this instant sort of success of climbing. It's very interesting to sort of, if you want to go analyze it. But I think that, like you said, success, people are starting to, and I don't know if it's like a generational thing, because I know the way my parents look at work, like even if they didn't like a job, they'd be like, oh, well, you know, it's a good job, just keep going through it. Whereas me, I've found, you know, in the various jobs that I've had, it doesn't matter how good the money's paying me, or, you know, how stable it is. If I'm miserable and it's not rewarding, I'm going to be like, okay, what's next? Because I don't care if I go like back to entry level if it's not fulfilling. And so I think it's very interesting to see how this generation, and I think even just people today, are measuring success, because there is very much that society pressure of like this idea of a timeline, if that makes sense. And how you've got to hit certain markers in the timeline, otherwise you're not successful, which is ridiculous, because no one goes through, as I said before, no one goes through life chronologically. Like, but society wants us to think that, I think. a lot of people are starting to, I know I have, like I've sort of gone, well, I don't want to work 5 days a week.
Yeah.
And I've been told, well, you're really lazy. Like people have said, oh, that's just a lazy thought. You know, you're at the start of your career. I'm like, no, I don't want to slave away at something that, you know, it's a job. And I think this is the other thing too. I think when we're in high school, we're taught to, you know, pursue our passions, and that our job is going to be our dream come true. And it's going to be so fulfilling. You can have a job that you enjoy and still not find it fulfilling.
Yeah.
Because I've had jobs before where I'm like, I like this, but I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And I remember talking to my mum and my sister about it. And I said, because my mum and my sister, they really love their job. And I said, what is it about your job that makes you, you know, really like it? And so, like, I think, without getting too corny and stuff, when my mum talks about her job, it just like lights up. She just lights her up, and her eyes get this sort of like, oh, I like it because of this and that. And I was like, I want that. Yeah. And she was realistic with me. She's like, you know, you might love it, but you're always going to have elements of it that you don't like. So I think that's the approach I've sort of taken with my jobs that I have now. Like, I do enjoy them, but there are elements of them that I don't enjoy doing, but that's just the workforce. And I think as you get older, you start to discover, okay, so it's not all rainbows and butterflies as we were like sort of led to believe, if that makes sense. And even like, you know, those amazing jobs that people like romanticize, like being a vet. I used to think, oh, being a vet would be a great job. Whereas like the reality of it is that, again, you sort of see this surface level. And I think that can be the harm, I guess, with these just in general, when people sort of, when society measures success, it's at a surface level. And I guess success is very different for it. It's based on the individual. But it's like there is that element of like society and the pressure that comes with that.
No, for sure. I think there can be a lot of societal pressure, especially around that timeline and hitting the markers, like you said. That can be really, and that can force people to give up on something that they wanted to do because they didn't make it in time. Or it can force them to settle down in an area where they're kind of like, oh, this is okay. Maybe there could be something better, but you know, this is stable. And I think there's nothing wrong with choosing stability. But I also think stability is a little bit of an illusion. So it's a tough one. And I know for me personally at the moment, I'm at the age and stage of my life where I'm like, I'm going to give this a crack, especially with my writing. I don't currently have any like dependents. I don't have a mortgage. Like, you know, if there's a time, it's going to be now, basically. But even saying that, I haven't written in 6 weeks. Whoops. You know, so it's like the idea that, and maybe success is the idea of is discipline on top of it as well. I don't doubt that some extra discipline could go a long way, but I've had days where I've written every day and I've had to throw over 2,000 words out because it was rubbish. So again, with like, you could write and write and write, and of course the more you have to play with. But yeah, it's just, there's no guarantees that, you know, strict timelines and routines and all of that are like the quick fix to success. I think another element of all this is all the quick fixes and tips and tricks that you see online, right?
Or like manifesting your dream life or your dream job, and it's like it's just another sort of like clickbait, I feel, because it's like, of course, like if I saw like a TikTok, oh yeah, you know, manifesting my dream life, let's have a look at this, and it's like, well, you know, I think it, like, at the end of the day, it comes down to, one, the individual, but also, like you said, it does like come down to discipline. And I think, I've had days where I go, oh my God, I should really like write today. And I don't, but I do other things. So I think that sometimes, like, I hate this expression, but I've grown to love it. So I used to hate when people say everyone has the same 24 hours in the day, because I was like, no, that's not true. Like, it is, but it's not, because everyone has different commitments. Whereas I'm starting to realize that you only have 24 hours in the day. You can't get everything done.
No.
And there's this, on TikTok, there's this girl I follow who she's like a fitness instructor, and she does great sort of like, some days it looks like this, and she'll like show us like the aesthetic of like, you know, eating well and meal prepping and like going to the gym, and her house is completely clean. And then she'll be like, and other days it looks like this, and then it's like sitting on the couch, clothes piled up, you know, eating pizza and stuff like that. And it's so true, because some days you'll have those 24 hours will be really short, and you'll be like, I've got no time to do anything, or you'll just be exhausted and be like, well, I can't do it. And then other days you'll be like, oh, I have so much time. So I think and I used to feel the pressure a little bit too, because I'd be like, well, I've got to get this uni assignment done, but I also want to write something, and I want to do this thing for the graduate's guide. And I was like, well, I can't do it all today. So I'd be like, have to pick one. What I have to pick one, and then what in the day goes next. Do you know what I mean? The next day. And I think that in terms of like organizing and taking that sort of pressure off yourself of I've got to get all this done has helped me a lot, because I start to go, well, okay, I can't get it all done. So, or like even just something as simple as, okay, well, if I'm going to go for a walk, I can't spend 2 hours on TikTok, or I can't watch because I don't have the time. I'm allocating that 45 minutes to going for a walk, or I'm allocating that 45 minutes to writing. So I think looking at it like that has definitely changed my perspective, because everyone does have the same 24 hours in the day, but it's how you plan around that, and how like, you know, you'll have weeks where you'll be so busy with social events, like you'll have no time to do anything, and then you have weeks where you've got nothing. And I think even with COVID in the last 2 years, if there's one thing that I learned, is that if you're going to do it, you'll do it, and if you're not, you won't, because we had 2 years of complete free time almost. And you know, there were things I was like, I'm going to learn how to play guitar, didn't do it. Like I was like, I'm going to learn a new language, didn't do it. So but I did, you know, I did write 30,000 words of a new book. I did read a lot more that I hadn't done for a while. So there's things that I still did. It's just, I think, you know, that success as well, because people, even in COVID, people were like, well, I picked up this new hobby. And so you'd be like, okay, I've got to do that. So I think as you touched on earlier, Gabby, it's like success is something that I guess comes down to the individual, and then it's working out what you classify as success, and then how you measure that against what society, if that makes sense.
No,
I know that
does.
just sounds like a lot of words like used over and over, but
no, it does make sense. No, you touched on so many good points there. There's like so many things I could talk about, because like even just going back to what you said about taking the pressure off, I think and this is something you did for me actually, is you told me, you're like, why don't you just take a break from your book just for the next few weeks and just take it off your plate? And I was like, yes. And I've done that, and it's been a bit longer than I was planning on doing it, but it's helped so much, because I no longer feel so guilty, because that's another thing that comes along with feeling like you're not succeeding fast enough or at all sometimes, is the guilt of I'm not doing enough then. And so, but just, you know, taking the pressure off sometimes and allowing yourself to focus in on other things, like getting our Grads Guide website redone. You should check it out. And a new wonderful piece that we've just posted when we interviewed actor Nathan Borg. All of those things are amazing, successful things too. And so I think it's such a multifaceted subject, and it's not just one way to be successful.
Do you find, because I know I find that I sort of downplay my success until other people say, oh, wow, that's amazing. Like last night when people were talking about the post, you should check it out, A Coffee with Nathan Borg, on our website. But that was something that we sort of kept like not a secret, but it was on the down low. It was just this document that we had, and we were going to publish it. And I caught up with my friend Gabby, and we went out for dinner last night, and we caught up with some friends, and they're like, oh, that post, that looked amazing. And they like that. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm a writer. Like that sort of like, I guess I'd be really interested to see how other people view, like famous people as well, view their success, because like for me, I just find, oh yeah, you know, like it was just a piece I wrote. Like I know that sounds ridiculous, but or like I remember when I wrote my first manuscript when I was in high school, and I was like, yeah, I wrote a book, and people were like, you wrote a book? Like how many words? And I was like, yeah, like I was like, oh, it's just a hobby. But like that sort of downplay of success, like I mean, I've tried to be more conscious of it recently, because I go, no, like I need to own that this was something that I accomplished, and like I worked hard on this. But I think, you know, I often see, I find the success that society deems, I guess, acceptable. I find that sometimes, because as well, like you said, you know, you're in your prime at the moment and you're pursuing a career path and also a passion that not a lot of people do. So like, I mean, if anyone in our audience is like 25, you might understand this, but a lot of your Instagram posts and social media will be filled with people getting engaged, or they've bought a house, or they're having a baby. And I see it, you see it, and we go, oh my gosh, like and then I'll spiral. I'll go, well, you know, in 5 years I'm going to be 30, and I haven't even thought about this yet. So I think like success is so different for everyone else, but it's just sort of, I guess, removing yourself from, and I've done a bit of a TikTok cleanse recently, because I was just like, it's a great app. I've got nothing against it. I think it can change a lot of people's life. It has. But at the same time, it's just being aware of those sort of like little triggers, I guess, that can send you to spiral, like how they've sent me to spiral. And I think there is that guilt, like you said. There's like, well, this person's doing this and they're working full time. Why aren't I doing this? And why don't I have the willpower to push myself to do this? But it's so different. You know, one of our favorite writers, Sarah J. Maas, her first book, Throne of Glass, it took her 10 years to publish it, and that was after she got the book deal. So that's 10 years of editing, and it's just like, that's insane. But you know, I had to dig sort of into the internet, because I was going on like a Sarah J. Maas, like, you know,
deep dive.
And I was like, this is one of the most successful writers of young adult, and I've only just sort of found this like 3 years into like loving her, if that makes sense. And I was like, I wish I'd known this, because now I look at that and go, well, that took her 10 years to publish, and that's why that book is so good, and that's why her other books are so good. But you don't hear about that, and that's what can be, I guess, discouraging from pursuing a passion, because sometimes it can feel like it's just too hard, if that makes sense.
And just like, why spend the time if it's just going to take that long? But that's also I think something people need to be aware of, because there are certain career paths where people would go, I don't care that it's going to take that long, I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that's where passion kind of comes into it a little bit too. Because for me with writing, if someone would have come with like a magic book and was like, okay, you're not going to publish your first book till you're 45, I wouldn't give up. I'd be like, okay, cool. So I think there's an element there too, where it's like, you know, do you just want the quick success of like, it's almost an ego versus like, I don't know what the other word is, but it's like, does your ego want it, or do you really want it? Like, do you want the success, or do you want the journey? Because even what you were saying before about kind of the success being like surface level, and not being an easy thing to find about Sarah, sometimes and downplaying our own success. I think sometimes it's not necessarily that we're downplaying it on purpose, but it's like we were there for the whole journey. Like you sat there every day finishing your manuscript, writing those words. It didn't feel like this great, like, you know, all of a sudden thing, like, wow, shock value, I wrote a manuscript. Like, no, it took forever. But then when you tell someone else, they're like, wow, that's huge. It's like, yeah, it is huge, because I spent so long doing it. So I wonder if we kind of get in our own head sometimes of like, well, I took forever, it was hard, I like deleted all these words halfway through and had to start again, and we're remembering all the ups and downs in the journey, and we're not then necessarily primed to celebrate the end result.
We're not coming into it cold, I think.
No,
and that's what a lot of people
exactly.
do when they come into success. They come into it at a cold level. It's like the first thing that they hear and they go, wow, that's why they go, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, and don't get me wrong, like when people talk about their journey, like you do look at it and you go, that's amazing. They were really successful. But when, like you said, like when, for example, like if I just told someone, oh, you know, I wrote a book, they'd be like, that's amazing. But I'm not talking about like all that time I spent on it. You know, there's ideas that I've had to shelve because I just go, it's at the moment, it's not ready. And for a long time, I worked on like trying to get this first draft that I loved of my book out there and finished and rewrite it. And I just got frustrated. And I'd see these people like getting book deals and I'd be like, what am I doing wrong? And then I shelved it. And I think you even gave me that advice. You're like, maybe try this one because this other idea that's coming through is a lot stronger.
Yeah.
And like the fact that I'd written 35,000 words in a very short time period, like just goes to show that sometimes like things might not be ready yet. And that's another thing of success is that things take time, like without getting, you know, too cliche. It's like you don't see a tree grow until you just like you see the tree, but you don't see it starts as a seed and it grows quietly, it's silent, and then all of a sudden it's a tree and you're like, wow, that's amazing,
that's a cool tree. And then it's there for like 300 years,
and it was there for like 300 years. Exactly.
No, it's so true though. It's I think society kind of lacks a little bit this like the quiet growing, which I think maybe we can both relate to as introverts, the quiet plodding along, especially as writers. I know we've touched on this a lot, and I hope this people listening to this know that you can apply this to kind of any creative aspect or any goal you have. But with Emma and I both being writers, it is a quiet practice. You sit alone in a room and you try and shut out the world and you try and put words on paper. It sometimes works and sometimes doesn't. So yeah, the celebration of like quietly growing, I think, is something we could all use more, and that is success in and of itself. Really, is that ability to kind of shut out the comparisons and all the noise at the end of the day and just be like, no, this is what I feel makes me successful. It can get a little bit harder when rejections come along and it's a bit more personalized. It can be a bit harder to take. I know for me, during the lockdown, I was applying to so many jobs that I kept joking I could make a scrapbook out of all my rejections. I did actually like table them out to try and like the way I went about this and like was I tabled it all out and was like trying to line up like what I was doing wrong and maybe I was just applying to the wrong places. It was over like 150. And
wow,
all of them.
That's all of them
but one, right? It's a lot. And it's like it hits your ego. It's like, well, I must be a failure. I must be like all of these terrible things because no one wants to hire me, and being hired is obviously a mark of success, and it is in its own right. And I hope throughout this video we're not downplaying the fact that we do experience successes throughout our life. It's just the idea that all these successes need to happen quickly and in succession and without any issues in between, or they were just little blips and they didn't like hurt our ego. It's like, it's not true. It's we did experience rejections, and I experienced a lot. And especially in the job market, it's still a little bit of a sore spot. Like I'm thinking like, oh, you know, I'll have to apply for jobs one day again. And I'm like, no.
Definitely. I mean, even me, like when I was trying to get work and applying for jobs and getting rejected, and then, you know, sort of sitting down and looking at why I was getting rejected, and then sort of changing my resume. And my sister, who was in the industry, was like, no, write it like this. And then all of a sudden it was like, bang, I was getting those jobs. But I find rejection can be such a personal thing, and it does really take, it's really hard to separate yourself from that, because they talk about that in the acting world. Like rejection is something that you have to, you know, develop a thick skin for. And it was something that I really struggled with when I was trying to get into drama school, because I was applying for all, like everything and anything. So I was applying for all the drama schools. I applied for the three big ones in Australia: WAPA, NIDA, VCA. There was one in Bendigo I applied for. There was the there's a whole heap of them, like, and are just constant rejection. But the worst thing about it is that they would always say, well, you know, we can't ever give you feedback because we see so many applicants. So they could never give you a reason as to why I was rejected. And so I would go into it, and I remember, like, when, you know, I'd wait for the application to come out, I would be successful, I'd get an audition and nothing, and I'd hear nothing, and then I'd be like, okay, I have to wait another year, like this feeling of like waiting, because like I felt like that was the path forward, and I had to keep climbing, and I was like, well, okay, going. This is the I have to keep going until I get in. And sometimes it's like sort of taking a step back and looking at, okay, well, and this is what I did at like one of the auditions. I remember I auditioned for VCA, and we actually got to see who they picked to stay back. And there was one that I did pick that they, like, I knew they were going to ask him because he was like purebred drama student. He was awesome. But anyway, and then there was another one that was completely random, dropped his line. Like I was like shocked. I was like, seriously, you picked him? And then I just remember after seeing that, I was like, this is pure luck. This is like, it is based on your ability to be a performer, but it's also based on, you know, where I fall on the week and the time frame of the auditions, and who they've seen before me, and what, you know, like if they're building a company for Romeo and Juliet, how many Romeos have they seen? How many Juliets have they seen? And that sort of like mentality of, okay, well, maybe like I was the Juliet, but they'd already picked a Juliet. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so I just remember that for me, that was like a light bulb moment of, this is pure luck, and this is not going to work. Like I can come back and try, but I need to try something else. I can't just have this as my one sort of tunnel vision. And like, I think that for me was the first time in a creative sense of being rejected. I was like, okay, well, this isn't working. What other avenue can I go? And I think rejection is a really important thing. And I guess it's hard at the time, but I guess if you can separate yourself from the rejection, and instead of like going, well, what's wrong with me? Look at what you're not doing that's tailored to what they want. Yeah. If that makes sense. You know, every job like that I've gone for, they've always said it's not the best applicant, it's the one that interviews the best. Or it's not the most capable, it's the one that interviews the best and scores the highest. And that's happened before. Like, so I think that, I guess, rejection, like I said, rejection is something that is incredibly personal, but if you can separate yourself from it, it'll help you in the long run, because I guess success is not like up. It's a constant, like, sort of, okay, we're going this way now, and it's a winding sort of path. And I think, touching on what I said earlier on in the episode, you know, we're constantly throughout school, it's like, you know, even something as basic as, okay, we get A+, and then you've got ungradable. And there's a constant, okay, well, I'm at B's, I can climb to B+, and then I can climb to A. It's a constant climbing ladder. But that's not how life works. It does, but it, like, there's always roadblocks. I used to always think that even something like, you know, I used to always think, okay, I've got to have a little bit of money behind me if I'm going to pursue my passions, right? You can work as much as you want and still not be prepared for your car breaking down and you need to get a new car. Like, it can just happen like that. That's life. So I guess, you know, and like, even like touching back on the sort of rejection thing, like Mark Ruffalo, who I love so much, but he, I think he got rejected for over 800 auditions before he got like just an acting role. And to like, that's a huge number of auditions, and that's not just in one period, that's over like a period of time. And I guess it's sort of that determination of, well, this is what I want. And separating himself from that rejection, I guess. Because I guess rejection and success go hand in hand, but it's how you sort of manage that. And I guess life is going to throw curveballs at you everywhere. Like you can, I'm a massive perfectionist and I overthink everything, so I always plan everything out, and in most of the cases, like you can't like for me, I was like, I had a full existential crisis when I couldn't get in. No, but like there was that light bulb moment for me when I was like, well, I have to wait another year to pursue my passion. When I wanted to get into drama. And then it was just like, well, this route isn't working. And there was just that light bulb moment of, oh, okay. It just, there's so many variables that you can't control. And I think when you start to, I guess experience, it happens through experience too, because, you know, I can say this in hindsight, but I experienced it. But when I was going through it, I guess, you know, you see, like I said earlier, you see people that are really successful, really young, and you go, well, they've made it. So why can't I? Even one of my friends who's trying to become a musician, she was just like, oh, like, you know, there's people that they go to LA and they get discovered. And she's like, what am I doing wrong? I was like, you're not doing anything wrong. You just, like, it's hard work. It's hard to get discovered. And it's like, you know, if everyone could be a singer, they would be. But I think that's the danger with sort of, I guess, the online world as well, because you can sort of see, you just see one level. You don't see everything that's underneath, which is, it can be like, I guess if you can separate that, like for me, when I saw that TikTok of that girl saying like, oh, you know, one day I got lazy, I was bored, or like I just decided to, write a book. Just decided to write a book, and you know, and now it's like a 6-figure deal, and I'm getting a movie deal. Like that's great, that's amazing,
but it's not true.
But it's not true. Because when you go back, it was like, well, how many books had she written before that book?
All the rejections,
how many drafts, how the direction, like it's like, I want to see that, because I see that and I go, oh, so I'm not good enough, and this is the bar to hit, if that makes sense. And it's like it's constantly like you're seeing that bar and you're like, oh, I've got to hit that bar, but it's absolute rubbish.
It's out of reach. Whereas when you're able to see the whole story, it's inspiring rather than confronting. You know, like definitely. If she had said like, oh, look at all I've been, and to be fair, like there are TikToks out there, and I even think this one girl went on to make a TikTok about how she had struggled and all the rejections, and that was much more in touch with the reality than the first one. And I'm glad that, and I hope that kind of keeps becoming a norm on TikTok and on all the platforms. I think TikTok's here to stay. It's becoming more and more just prolific everywhere. But I think there's this fight for like the transparency, like the truth to come out. I don't know about you, but I definitely find that like now I switch off the minute I see someone say like downplaying success, because it's just like, success is a hard thing. I don't want to hear about the fact that you got this quickly. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not success. It's that's luck. If you did it really fast, it's probably, and it's not to saying it wasn't hard work. 100% you can work really hard and something can happen really quickly for you, but it is also a big element of timing and luck. Right place, right time, which happens in all elements of success too. Like you know, you can work as hard as you want, but sometimes the timing is not right, the project's not right, and you have to try again. It doesn't mean what you did was bad. It just means it wasn't for the right person or whatever. Especially in the creative space, when you're pitching a lot of ideas, it doesn't mean the idea you had is bad. It's just wasn't what they were looking for. Same with applying for jobs, same with going to uni. It's like it all applies. I think if we're going to wrap up today's episode with some takeaways, what do you think people should take away from this?
I definitely, like for me, I think that there's nothing, I hope we haven't scared you away from like TikTok, and that's not our message. It's more so that when you're seeing these videos of instant success and instant gratification, don't feel like you're not doing enough, because everyone's journey is different. I know we talk about that so much, but it is. And seeing that can be like, even with your and my experience, Gabby, it can be detrimental, and you can sort of start to pick apart your your progress and your process.
Mm-hmm.
But you're not doing anything wrong. If it's I'm a big believer of, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And if you work hard, and you believe in that passion, it'll come to fruition, because that's like how you said earlier in the episode, Gabby, it's not your ego in the end, it's what you want. And I think if it is your ego, you will learn that through the experience of going, okay, well, maybe this isn't what I thought I wanted, and sort of steering your path in another direction.
Absolutely. I think if there's anything for people listening, that if you're like, what should I do about all this, the first thing I would say is to write your own definition of what success means to you. I think I might do
that.
I've heard that kind of, I'm not going to claim that as that was my idea. I have heard that online before, but writing, and so having that kind of core message you can come back to when you do start to spiral and compare yourself, of like, this is what I think is success for me right now. And I think allowing that definition to be changed, like ever changing as you grow, too, is really important. And take breaks from social media for your mental health, because it really does help, and it helps quieten the noise.
Definitely. I feel like we're so constant these days with, like, the radio, the work, everything's just like at us, the noise. It does make a difference.
It does.
A little bit of a cleanse. Sure. And I think, did you do you did a blog post, didn't you, about how to like sort of clean?
I did.
Your social
I did.
How to clean your
clean up your social
media and sort of turn down that noise.
I wrote that one a couple of years ago, but I think it still stands true. I can't try to quite regularly go through my following list on all my social medias, just to make clear out what I don't need, basically. And if I
make a new one,
or make a new one completely. And another one that I found helps a lot with comparison is, when you get stuck in ruts with people where you watch them to get mad. I don't know if you've ever done that before. I ban myself from doing that now, so then I unfollow them. If I'm like, I'm watching this person to be judgy, then I'm gonna get rid of it, because there's no point me triggering myself to do that. Like, that's not healthy. But I think ultimately from this episode, I hope we shared that it's okay if it takes a while. It doesn't mean you're a failure, basically. No. It's okay.
And it doesn't mean your dreams have expired because you haven't hit it at a certain time point.
Exactly.
That is, that, because for me that was a big thing. I thought, I haven't made it by this age, or I haven't published a book, so I guess I'm never going to do it. That's
I guess it will never rubbish. Happen. It's rubbish.
And that is society's pressure of success on you. So definitely. Awesome. Well, just remember, we are on your side
at the Graduate's Guide.
Bye.
Bye.